weekend at the country house with him. We have the wine and then the secret plan.
The router was failing slowly in my basement when I heard my wife whispering upstairs like she was planning a secret operation. No, he's completely clueless, Brooke's voice drifted down through the heating vents. I'll be at the country house all weekend. Bring the wine and maybe that new toy we talked about. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I froze, screwdriver halfway to the circuit board. 23 years of marriage, and I'd never heard my wife use that tone. Sultry, secretive, like she was ordering something off a very different kind of menu. Unless she was talking about a Makita drill, which seemed unlikely given the breathy laugh that followed. My name's Daniel Parker, and up until that moment I thought I was living the suburban dream. Decent house in Boulder, Colorado, where the tech boom meets blue-collar decay. I'm 45, work IT security for a mid-sized company, and I've got the kind of dad bod that screams, I used to be athletic, but now I drink beer and fix things in my basement. My wife Brooke is Instagram famous, well, locally famous, for her interior design business. All reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs, the kind of stuff that makes rich people feel authentic. He won't suspect anything, she continued, and I could hear her moving around the kitchen above me. Daniel's too busy playing with his computers to notice what's happening in the real world. The screwdriver slipped and gouged my thumb. A cut opened, but I barely felt it. 23 years, and she thought I was clueless. Maybe I had been, but not anymore. I crept up the basement stairs, each step a careful negotiation with the creaky wood. Through the crack in the door, I could see Brooke pacing by the kitchen island, phone pressed to her ear. She was wearing that black dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. And her blonde hair was done up in a way that suggested this conversation was important. The renovation is going perfectly, she said, and laughed again. That laugh used to make my chest tight with affection. Now it made my stomach churn. Daniel thinks I'm just playing house out there. He has no idea how much work I'm really putting in. She hung up and immediately started texting, her fingers flying across the screen with the kind of urgency usually reserved for emergencies. I watched her smile at whatever response she got, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The country house. 6 months ago, Brooke had convinced me to buy a fixer-upper about 30 miles outside town. An investment, she'd called it. Somewhere we can escape the city noise. I'd signed the papers because I trusted her business sense, and because she'd seemed so excited about the project. She'd been spending every weekend out there, coming home exhausted and covered in dust, complaining about contractors and permits and the million little details that go into renovation. Apparently, some of those details were more personal than others. I slipped back down to the basement and sat heavily in my desk chair, staring at the half-repaired router. My hands were shaking, with rage or shock, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. The basement suddenly felt like what it was, a man cave for a man whose wife was playing house with someone else. My phone buzzed. Text from Brooke. Working late at the house again tomorrow, don't wait up. Love you. Love you. 2 words that used to mean everything, now sitting on my screen like a lie in Times New Roman. I looked around my basement kingdom, servers humming in the corner, monitors glowing, cables snaking across every surface like electronic ivy. This was my world, the place where I understood the rules, where problems had solutions, and systems had logic. Upstairs, my wife was planning her weekend with another man, and I was supposed to be too clueless to notice. She was wrong about that. I opened my laptop and started researching micro cameras. If Brooke wanted to play renovation games at the country house, maybe it was time I learned the rules. The next morning, Brooke was all business and fake smiles, bustling around the kitchen in her designer jeans and work boots that had never seen actual work. She kissed my cheek, a dry, perfunctory peck that felt like a signature on a contract neither of us wanted to honor. Big day at the house, she announced, shoving papers into her leather messenger bag. The contractor's finally going to start on the master bathroom. Which contractor? I asked, keeping my voice casual while I scrolled through my phone. I thought you were between guys. She paused for just a second, but I caught it. Wade Foster. I think I mentioned him. He did the Hendersons' kitchen last year. Wade Foster. I filed the name away and made a mental note to look him up later. Need any help today? I could swing by after work. No! The word came out sharp. Then she softened it with a laugh. I mean, it's going to be chaos. Dust everywhere, power tools, very boring stuff. You'd hate it. Right. Because nothing says boring renovation work, like telling your boyfriend to bring wine and toys. Our daughter Mia wandered into the kitchen, 17 years old and surgically attached to her phone. She had Brooke's blonde hair and my stubborn streak, though lately she seemed to think I was the most embarrassing human on the planet. Dad, you're staring, she said, without looking up from her screen. It's creepy. Just admiring my beautiful family, I said, which earned me an eye roll that could have powered a small city. Brooke grabbed her keys. I'll probably be late again. There's leftover Chinese in the fridge. Chinese food and quality time with my dad, Mia muttered. Living the dream. After they left, the house felt hollow. I sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee that had gone cold, and tried to figure out when everything had started going wrong. When had Brooke stopped including me in her renovation plans? When had she started working weekends? When had she bought a second phone? Because yes, I'd noticed the new iPhone that lived in her purse, the one she checked constantly but never answered in front of me. At work, I couldn't concentrate. My job involves protecting other people's digital secrets, but I couldn't even figure out what my own wife was hiding. During lunch, I drove to Radio Shack and bought a micro camera, the kind security companies use for covert surveillance. Tiny thing, no bigger than a shirt button, with wireless transmission and motion activation. Keeping an eye on the babysitter? The clerk asked, with a knowing grin. Something like that, I said. That evening, I told Brooke I was going to the gym, which wasn't entirely a lie. I did stop by Ray's boxing gym, the kind of blue-collar establishment where the equipment was old but functional, and the guys didn't care what you did for a living as long as you could take a punch. Coach Ray was in his 60s, built like a fire hydrant, with hands that looked like they'd been carved from oak. He'd been running the gym since before I was born, and he had the kind of practical wisdom that comes from watching people fight their demons in a literal ring. You look like shit, Parker, he said as I walked in. Thanks, Ray. Always know how to make a guy feel welcome. I'm serious. You've got that look. Like someone ran over your dog, and you're trying to decide whether to bury it or get revenge. I hit the heavy bag for 30 minutes, working out frustrations I couldn't name. Ray watched from across the room, occasionally shouting corrections, but mostly just letting me pound leather until my knuckles were raw. Woman troubles? He asked when I finally stopped. Is it that obvious? Son, I've been married 4 times. I know the look. He tossed me a towel. You want some advice? Not really. Good, because I wasn't going to give you any. But I will say this. Whatever you're thinking about doing, make sure you can live with it afterward. I left the gym and drove to the country house. It was after 9, full dark, and Brooke's car wasn't in the driveway. The house sat on 5 acres, mostly woods, with a small lake in the back and an old barn that leaned like it was tired of standing up. We'd gotten it for a steal because the previous owners had started renovating and run out of money halfway through. I used my key to let myself in. The place smelled like sawdust and fresh paint, and I could see that Brooke really had been working. The downstairs was taking shape, new flooring, updated electrical, walls that had been torn down to create an open concept. It looked good, professional. I found the perfect spot for the camera in the living room, inside a table lamp that sat on the mantel, positioned to cover most of the main floor. The installation took 5 minutes, and the wireless signal was strong enough to reach my phone from the road. As I was leaving, I noticed a truck parked behind the barn, barely visible in the shadows. A big Ford F-250, midnight blue, with contractor plates. I walked over and peered through the windows. The interior was clean but lived in. Coffee cups, work gloves, a toolbox in the back seat. On the dashboard, a business card, Wade Foster Construction. So the contractor was here, but Brooke's car wasn't. Interesting. I was walking back to my car when I heard voices from the woods. Low, intimate conversation punctuated by laughter. I stood perfectly still, listening, but couldn't make out words. Just the cadence of two people who knew each other well, who were comfortable in the dark together. My phone buzzed. Text from Brooke. Still working. Home by 11. I got in my car and drove away, but I didn't go home. Instead, I parked at a gas station 2 miles down the road and activated the camera feed on my phone. At 10:47 p.m., the motion sensor triggered. The living room filled with light, and I watched my wife walk into frame with a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, handsome in that rugged, outdoorsy way that makes women write romance novels. They were holding hands. I watched them sit on the couch I'd helped pick out, that we'd bought together for our weekend retreat. I watched him pour wine while she lit candles. I watched them talk and laugh and touch each other with the casual intimacy of people who'd done this before. Then I watched them do things that made me want to throw my phone against the windshield. Instead, I drove home and waited for my wife to come back from her work. Brooke came home at 11:43 p.m., smelling like wine and lies. She kissed my forehead as I pretended to sleep, then slipped into the bathroom for what sounded like the world's most thorough shower. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying what I'd seen on that tiny phone screen. 23 years of marriage, and I'd never suspected. Maybe Ray was right. Maybe I did look like someone whose dog had been run over. Except it wasn't my dog. It was my entire life. The next morning brought a new complication in the form of my brother-in-law, Marcus Webb. Marcus was Brooke's younger brother, 34 years old and professionally unemployed. He had the kind of confidence that comes from never having to face real consequences, probably because his sister had been bailing him out of trouble since they were kids. He showed up at our house around 10 a.m., driving a BMW that was definitely newer than mine, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly car payment. "Danny boy," he announced, letting himself in through the front door like he owned the place. "Where's my beautiful sister?" "At work," I said, not looking up from my laptop. I was supposed to be debugging a network security issue, but mostly I was researching Wade Foster Construction and trying not to think about what I'd witnessed the night before. "Work, right?" Marcus helped himself to coffee and sat down across from me at the kitchen table. "This whole renovation thing is really taking off, huh? Brooke says she's making serious money." "She's talented," I said, which was true. Brooke had always been good at making things beautiful, at seeing potential where other people saw problems. I just hadn't realized she'd started applying those skills to her love life. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with the kind of calculating look that made me uncomfortable. "You know, Danny, I've been thinking. This country house project, it's got real potential, investment potential." "Okay. I mean, Brooke's putting all this work into it, making it gorgeous, and you guys are just going to use it as a weekend place? Seems like a waste." I finally looked up from my laptop. "What are you getting at, Marcus?" "Partnership opportunity. I've got some investors who are interested in flipping properties in that area. Rural chic is huge right now. City people want that authentic country experience, you know? We could buy the house from you, finish the renovation, and flip it for serious profit." "The house isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale, Danny. It's just a matter of price." He leaned forward, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with whatever he'd been drinking the night before. "Look, I know things have been tight lately. Mia's got college coming up. Your job in IT isn't exactly recession-proof, and Brooke's business is still getting off the ground. This could be a real windfall for your family." I said no. Marcus's smile faltered, just slightly. "You might want to think about it. Talk to Brooke. I bet she'd be interested." "I bet she would," I said, and something in my tone made him sit back. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just that Brooke's been spending a lot of time at that house lately. She's gotten very attached to the project." We stared at each other across the table. Marcus had always been good at reading people. It's how he'd managed to coast through life without developing any actual skills, and I could see him trying to figure out what I knew. "Brooke works hard," he said finally. "She deserves success. She deserves a lot of things." That evening, Brooke announced she was having dinner with her friend Ashley, the realtor who'd helped us find the country house. Ashley was one of those women who collected other people's secrets like vintage jewelry, beautiful, valuable, and always on display when the occasion called for it. "Girls' night," Brooke said, checking her makeup in the hallway mirror. "We're going to that new wine bar downtown." "Have fun," I said, but I was already pulling up the camera feed on my phone. Sure enough, at 8:15 p.m., motion activated in the country house living room. But this time, it wasn't just Brooke and Wade. Ashley was there too, along with Marcus and two other people I didn't recognize. A woman in her 40s with short dark hair and a younger guy who looked like he spent serious time at the gym. They were all sitting around our coffee table, drinking wine, and having what looked like a very serious conversation. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see documents being passed around, papers being signed, phones being checked constantly. This wasn't a romantic tryst. This was a business meeting. I watched for 2 hours, taking screenshots, trying to read lips, growing more confused and angry by the minute. Whatever was happening in my country house, it involved my wife, my brother-in-law, and a group of people I'd never met, conducting business I knew nothing about. At 10:30, my phone rang. Brooke. "Hey, honey," she said, and I could hear restaurant noise in the background. "Ashley and I are going to make it a late night. Don't wait up. Having fun? Oh, you know how it is. Girl talk, wine, the usual." She laughed, and it sounded genuine. "Love you." "Love you too," I said, watching her on my phone screen as she hung up and rejoined the meeting that supposedly wasn't happening. That's when I realized I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being played in a game I didn't even know existed, by people who thought I was too stupid to figure out the rules. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next few days passed in a blur of fake normalcy and growing paranoia. I went to work, debugged security systems, and pretended I didn't know my wife was lying to me about everything from her dinner plans to her weekend schedule. At home, Brooke was affectionate and chatty, full of stories about renovation progress and client meetings that I now knew were complete fiction. The hardest part was acting normal around our friends. We had a standing Friday night tradition, dinner and drinks with Tom and Jennifer Morrison, our neighbors and closest couple friends for the past 8 years. Tom worked in construction management, Jennifer was a nurse, and they were the kind of solid, unpretentious people who made suburban life bearable. This Friday, we met at Murphy's Roadhouse, a local bar that served decent burgers and attracted the kind of crowd that minded their own business. I was nursing my second beer and trying to follow a conversation about property taxes when Tom dropped a bomb. "So I hear Brooke's working with Wade Foster on the country house," he said, cutting into his steak. "Guy's got a good reputation, but he's expensive." I felt Brooke tense beside me. "You know Wade?" "Sure. We've bid against each other on a few jobs. He does quality work, but he's got some interesting business practices." "What kind of practices?" I asked. Tom shrugged. "He's got investors, silent partners who help finance his bigger projects in exchange for a cut of the profits. Smart way to scale up, but it can get complicated when you're dealing with residential clients who don't understand the arrangement." Jennifer leaned forward. "I heard he's been buying up properties in that area. fixing them up and flipping them for city buyers who want that rural experience. Really? Brooke said, her voice carefully neutral. Yeah, my cousin lives out that way. Says there's been a lot of activity lately. Properties changing hands, new construction, that sort of thing. Good for property values, I guess. I looked at my wife, who was suddenly very interested in her salad. Brooke, did Wade mention anything about investors when you hired him? We've discussed various financing options, she said, which wasn't really an answer. Tom nodded. That's probably smart. These renovation projects can get expensive fast, especially if you're doing quality work. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I kept thinking about what Tom had said. Investors, silent partners, properties changing hands. It was starting to sound like Marcus's partnership opportunity wasn't as random as I'd thought. After dinner, we walked out to the parking lot together. Tom pulled me aside while the women were saying their goodbyes. Hey, can I ask you something? He said, his voice low. Is everything okay with you and Brooke? Why do you ask? I don't know, man. She seems different lately, distracted, and you look like you haven't been sleeping. I wanted to tell him everything. Tom was a good friend, the kind of guy who'd help you move a body if you asked nicely. But I wasn't ready to admit out loud that my marriage was falling apart. Just work stress, I said. You know how it is. Tom nodded, but he didn't look convinced. If you ever need to talk, or if there's anything Jennifer and I can do. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. But as we drove home, I realized that Tom and Jennifer might not be the allies I thought they were. Because if Wade Foster was as well known in construction circles as Tom suggested, and if there really was a lot of property speculation happening in our area, then maybe my friends already knew more about my wife's activities than I did. Maybe everyone knew, and I was the only one still pretending everything was normal. That night, I lay in bed listening to Brooke's breathing and planning my next move. The camera had given me evidence of an affair, but Tom's comments suggested something bigger was happening. If Brooke was involved in some kind of property investment scheme with Wade and Marcus, then her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was financial. And if I was right about that, then I needed to be very careful about how I handled the situation. Because in my experience, people who steal your money are a lot more dangerous than people who just steal your heart. I was about to find out just how dangerous. Saturday morning brought the kind of Colorado sunshine that makes you forget it's October, and Brooke was in full renovation mode. Work clothes, tool belt, hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look 10 years younger. Big day at the house, she announced, loading supplies into her SUV. Wade's bringing a crew to work on the kitchen cabinets. Sounds expensive, I said. It's an investment. We talked about this. Did we? Because I don't remember discussing a budget that includes weekend crews and premium materials. She paused, a box of tile samples halfway to the car. Daniel, what's gotten into you lately? You've been so suspicious. Maybe I'm just paying attention for the first time in a while. We stared at each other across the driveway. In the morning light, I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she was calculating how much I might know and how much she could get away with denying. I'm trying to build something here, she said finally. Something that benefits our whole family. I wish you could be more supportive. I'm very supportive. In fact, I think I'll come out to the house today. Help with whatever needs doing. No! The word came out sharp, almost panicked. I mean, it's going to be chaos, power tools, dust everywhere, not really your thing. Since when do you decide what my thing is? Before she could answer, Marcus pulled into our driveway in his BMW. Perfect timing, as usual. Morning, Danny, he called out, all fake enthusiasm and expensive sunglasses. Beautiful day for some manual labor, right? Marcus is helping today, Brooke said quickly. We don't need... Actually, I interrupted. I was just telling Brooke that I'd like to see the progress you've been making. It's my house too, after all. Marcus and Brooke exchanged a look that lasted about 2 seconds too long. Of course it is, Marcus said smoothly. But honestly, Danny, today's not ideal. We're doing some pretty technical work, and I'm an IT professional, Marcus. I think I can handle watching people install cabinets. It's not about that. It's about workflow, you know? Too many people in a small space, different skill sets, that sort of thing. I looked back and forth between them, these two people who were supposed to care about me, who were standing in my driveway telling me I wasn't welcome at my own property. You know what? I said. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't want to get in the way of all that technical cabinet installation. Relief flooded both their faces. But I will be stopping by later, I continued. Maybe around dinner time. I'll bring pizza for the crew. The relief disappeared. That's really not necessary, Brooke said. I insist. What kind of husband would I be if I didn't support my wife's important work? I went back inside, leaving them to whisper urgently in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched Marcus gesticulating while Brooke shook her head. Whatever they were planning, my unexpected interest was clearly a problem. Good. I spent the day at Ray's gym, working the heavy bag and thinking about what I'd learned. The affair was bad enough, but the financial deception made it worse. If Brooke and Marcus were using the country house as part of some investment scheme without my knowledge, they were risking more than just my marriage. They were risking my financial future. Around 5 p.m., I drove out to the country house. I'd stopped at Tony's Pizza and bought 3 large pies, enough to feed a construction crew. But when I pulled into the driveway, there were no work trucks. No crew. Just Brooke's SUV and Wade's Ford, parked behind the barn like they were hiding from something. I walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. I used my key and let myself in. The house was quiet, but I could hear voices from upstairs. Low, urgent conversation that stopped the moment my footsteps creaked on the stairs. "Hello," I called out. "Pizza delivery." I found them in the master bedroom. Brooke, Wade, Marcus, Ashley, and the 2 strangers from the other night. They were standing around a folding table covered with papers, laptops, and what looked like architectural plans. "Daniel!" Brooke's voice was an octave too high. "I thought you were coming later." "Surprise," I said, looking around the room. "So this is what cabinet installation looks like these days." Wade stepped forward. He was bigger than he'd looked on the camera feed, with the kind of shoulders that came from actual physical work and the kind of confidence that came from never backing down from a fight. "You must be the husband," he said, extending a hand. "Wade Foster." I ignored the handshake. "And you must be the contractor who's been working so hard on my house." "That's right." "Funny, I don't see much construction work happening up here. Looks more like a business meeting." The silence stretched out like a wire about to snap. Ashley cleared her throat. "We were just discussing some design options," she said, "getting everyone's input on the renovation plans." Everyone except the person who owns the house. Marcus stepped in, trying to play peacemaker. "Danny, why don't we go downstairs and talk? I can explain what we're working on here." "I'd love that," I said. "Let's all go downstairs and talk." We trooped down to the living room, where I set the pizza boxes on the coffee table and looked around at the faces staring back at me. 6 people who all knew something I wasn't supposed to know, trying to figure out how to handle the husband who'd shown up uninvited to his own property. "So," I said, settling into the chair that gave me the best view of everyone, "who wants to tell me what's really going on here?" The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a drywall saw. 6 pairs of eyes stared at me, and I could practically hear the mental calculations happening. How much did I know? How much could they deny? And what was the best way to handle a situation that had clearly gone off script? Marcus cleared his throat first. "Danny, I think there might be some confusion here." "I'm sure there is. Why don't you clear it up for me?" Brooke sat down on the couch, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Daniel, I was going to talk to you about this. I just wanted to make sure everything was finalized before what? Before you sold my house out from under me? It's not like that, Ashley interjected. She had that realtor smile, the one that said, "Trust me," while picking your pocket. This is actually a fantastic opportunity for your family. I'm listening. Wade leaned against the mantel, arms crossed. He hadn't said anything since the introductions, but I could see him watching me, evaluating. The two strangers, the dark-haired woman and the gym rat, stayed by the window, looking like they wished they were anywhere else. The thing is, Marcus said, settling into sales mode, this area is about to explode. Property values are going to skyrocket over the next 5 years, and we have a chance to get in on the ground floor. We? A group of investors, people who understand the potential of rural development, who have the resources to buy properties, improve them, and create something really special. And my house fits into this how? Brooke finally found her voice. They want to buy the house from us, Daniel, for significantly more than we paid for it. How significantly? Double, Ashley said. Maybe more, depending on how the renovation turns out. I looked around the room. And you all decided this without consulting me because we wanted to present you with a complete proposal, Marcus said. Show you the numbers, the projections, the whole package. How thoughtful. The dark-haired woman stepped forward. Mr. Parker, I'm Linda Chen. I represent a development group that specializes in rural residential projects. What we're proposing would benefit everyone involved. Including my wife's contractor? Wade straightened up. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Are you sleeping with my wife? The question hit the room like a grenade. Brooke gasped, Marcus started to sputter, and Ashley looked like she'd swallowed something unpleasant. Wade, to his credit, didn't flinch. That's a hell of an accusation, he said. It's a simple question. Daniel, stop it, Brooke said, but her voice was shaking. This is ridiculous. Is it? Because I've been watching, Brooke. I know about your weekend meetings, your late-night phone calls, your sudden interest in hands-on renovation work. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app, scrolling to the screenshots I'd taken. I know about the wine, the candles, and the very personal attention you've been giving to quality control. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't confusion or calculation. This was the moment when everyone realized the game was over. Wade pushed off from the mantel. You've been spying on us. I've been protecting my interests. Turns out I was right to be concerned. Daniel, Brooke's voice was barely a whisper. I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first, I want to hear about this development deal. Because it seems like my wife's affair and my brother-in-law's business opportunity are connected in ways that go beyond coincidence. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Linda Chen stepped forward again, clearly the only person in the room with any composure left. Mr. Parker, your wife approached us about selling this property. She indicated that you were interested in moving forward with a quick sale. Did she now? The affair, Linda continued, was not part of our business arrangement, though I understand how it might appear otherwise. How generous of you to clarify that. Ashley finally found her voice. Daniel, you have to understand. Brooke was trying to help your family. The renovation costs were getting out of hand, and this sale would have solved all your financial problems. What financial problems? Another silence. Another exchange of looks. Daniel, Brooke said slowly, I know about the credit cards, the second mortgage you took out last year, Mia's college fund. What about Mia's college fund? I know you've been borrowing from it, to cover the renovation costs, the property taxes, all of it. I haven't touched Mia's college fund. The bank statements. What bank statements? Marcus cleared his throat. Danny, I think there might be some confusion about the financial arrangements here. I looked at my brother-in-law, really looked at him and suddenly understood. You son of a bitch. You've been moving money around, haven't you? It's not stealing if it's family, he said quickly. And it was all going to be paid back with interest once the sale went through. You've been embezzling from my accounts. Borrowing. Temporarily. I stood up, and Wade tensed like he was expecting a fight. Maybe he was right to expect one. So, let me see if I understand this correctly, I said, my voice calm. My wife has been having an affair with her contractor. My brother-in-law has been stealing money from my accounts. My realtor friend has been facilitating a property sale I never agreed to. And you all thought I was too stupid to figure it out. Daniel, Brooke started, but I held up a hand. I'm not finished. You've been meeting in my house, using my property as your headquarters, planning to sell my home and steal my money, all while treating me like I'm some kind of idiot who doesn't deserve to know what's happening in his own life. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Brooke said, tears starting to flow. The affair, I mean. Wade and I, it just happened. Bullshit. Affairs don't just happen. They're planned, like everything else you've been doing behind my back. Wade stepped forward. Look, Parker, maybe we should all calm down and— Don't, I pointed at him. Don't you dare tell me to calm down in my own house. Actually, Linda Chen said quietly, according to the paperwork, this house is currently under contract to our development group. The room went silent. What did you just say? Brooke was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Daniel, I can explain. The financial situation was getting desperate and Marcus said, You forged my signature. It's not forgery if we're married. Community property laws. You forged my signature on a real estate contract. Ashley stepped in. Daniel, technically under Colorado law, either spouse can— Get out. What? All of you, get out of my house. Wade moved toward me. You need to watch your tone. And you need to get out before I call the police and report you for trespassing, fraud, and adultery. Adultery isn't a crime in Colorado, Linda Chen said helpfully, but fraud is, and theft, and forgery. I looked around the room. So here's what's going to happen. You're all going to leave, now. And then we're going to see how this plays out when lawyers get involved. Daniel, please, Brooke begged. Let's just talk about this like adults. Adults don't lie to their spouses for months while stealing their money and selling their property. Marcus tried one last time. Danny, be reasonable. This deal could make us all rich. Us. There is no us, Marcus. There's me, and there's a bunch of people who tried to screw me over. I walked to the front door and held it open. Get out. They filed past me one by one. Linda Chen and her silent partner first, then Ashley, then Marcus. Wade stopped in front of me. This isn't over, he said quietly. You're right about that. Brooke was the last to leave. She paused in the doorway, looking back at me with red eyes and ruined makeup. I never meant for it to happen like this, she said, but you meant for it to happen. She didn't answer. She just walked to her car and drove away, leaving me alone in the house where I'd discovered that my entire life was a lie. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the taillights disappear down the country road. Then I went back inside, sat down at the table covered with their paperwork, and started planning my revenge. The next week passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. Brooke moved in with Ashley, temporarily, taking most of her clothes and leaving behind 23 years of shared history like it was something she could pack up later. Mia, caught between loyalty to her mother and confusion about what was happening, spent most of her time at friends' houses, avoiding the wreckage of our family. I used the time to get my affairs in order. Literally. First, I secured my finances, changed passwords, moved money to accounts Marcus couldn't access, and documented every unauthorized transaction I could find. The son of a bitch had been skimming for months, using his power of attorney from an old business deal to move funds around. Not enough to trigger fraud alerts, but enough to add up to serious money over time. Second, I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Tom Morrison's brother-in-law, a divorce attorney who specialized in complex financial cases and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when clients had been betrayed. Third, I did what I do best. I gathered information. Wade Foster, it turned out, had been running his investment scheme for 3 years. He'd target married couples with renovation projects, seduce the wives, and convince them to sell their properties to his development group at below-market prices. The wives thought they were getting a good deal and a romantic adventure. The husbands usually found out too late to do anything about it. Linda Chen's development group was legitimate, but they specialized in acquiring rural properties through what the real estate industry politely called distressed sales. Properties where the owners were facing financial pressure, marital problems, or other personal crises that made them willing to sell quickly and cheaply. Ashley had been feeding them leads for 2 years, earning substantial commissions for every deal she facilitated. She'd probably identified Brooke and me as targets the moment we started looking at country properties. Marcus was just a garden-variety scumbag who'd seen an opportunity to make money off his sister's marriage problems. But the most interesting thing I learned was that Wade had done this before. 6 times, to be exact. And in each case, the husband had either been too embarrassed to fight back or too financially destroyed to afford a legal battle. I was neither embarrassed nor destroyed. I was pissed off. On Friday night, exactly 1 week after the confrontation at the country house, I drove to Murphy's Roadhouse. It was the kind of place where the local construction crews went to drink after work, and I knew Wade would be there. He was a creature of habit. Every Friday, same bar stool, same beer, same routine. I found him holding court with a couple of younger guys, probably his crew, telling stories that involved a lot of gesturing and laughter. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man who'd pulled off another successful con. I walked up to the bar and ordered a beer, positioning myself close enough to hear the conversation. "So then the husband shows up," Wade was saying, all suspicious and demanding answers, like he's some kind of detective. More laughter. "What did you do?" one of the crew asked. "Same thing I always do. Let him blow off steam, then waited for him to realize he didn't have any real options. These IT guys, they're all the same. Lots of talk, no action." "What about the wife?" "She'll come around. They always do. A few more weeks of marriage counseling and financial pressure, and she'll be ready to sign whatever papers we put in front of her." I took a long drink of my beer and smiled. Wade Foster had made 2 critical mistakes. First, he'd underestimated me. Second, he'd done it in public, in front of witnesses who didn't know I was listening. I waited until he got up to use the restroom, then followed him. The men's room at Murphy's was exactly what you'd expect. 2 urinals, 1 stall, graffiti that had been accumulating since the Carter administration. Wade was washing his hands when I walked in. "Well, well," he said, catching my reflection in the mirror. "If it isn't the suspicious husband." Wade. "Come to apologize for the other night? Because that was pretty embarrassing, Dan. For you, I mean." "Actually, I came to give you some information." He turned around, leaning against the sink. "Yeah? What kind of information?" "The kind that might help you make better decisions going forward." "I'm listening." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo, Wade and Brooke, taken through the country house window, in a position that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. "Nice camera work," he said, unimpressed. "You planning to show that to a divorce lawyer? Because I hate to break it to you, but adultery doesn't mean much in no-fault states." "You're right. But fraud does, and theft, and conspiracy." His expression shifted slightly. "See, the thing about being an IT security specialist is that I understand how information works, how to gather it, how to verify it, how to use it." I swiped to the next photo, a bank statement showing Marcus's unauthorized transfers. Then another, emails between Ashley and Linda Chen discussing target properties. Then another, Wade's business records showing a pattern of similar schemes. "I've been busy this week," I said. learning all sorts of interesting things about you and your business partners. Wade's confidence was starting to crack. What do you want? I want you to understand something. You picked the wrong mark this time. I'm not some embarrassed husband who's going to slink away and let you steal my life. I'm someone who knows how to fight back. Is that a threat? It's a promise. By Monday morning, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit will have copies of everything I've collected. The Colorado Attorney General's office will have a complaint about your real estate fraud scheme. And the IRS will have some very interesting questions about your unreported income. Wade stepped forward, trying to use his size to intimidate me. You're making a big mistake, Parker. The only mistake I made was trusting people I shouldn't have trusted, but I'm done making that mistake. I put my phone away and headed for the door. Oh, and Wade, that conversation you were having at the bar about how IT guys are all talk and no action, you might want to be more careful about who's listening. I left him standing in the restroom and walked back into the bar. His crew was still at their table, and I could see them watching as Wade emerged a few minutes later, looking shaken. I finished my beer and went home to my empty house, where I spent the weekend putting the finishing touches on my plan. Because Wade was right about one thing. I was an IT guy. But he was wrong about what that meant. IT guys don't just talk. We plan. We prepare. We find the vulnerabilities in the system and exploit them with surgical precision. And I was about to show him exactly how much action one motivated IT guy could take. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day systematically destroying the lives of everyone who'd betrayed me. Not physically. I'm not a violent man. But in the modern world, there are more effective ways to fight back than throwing punches. I started with Marcus. My brother-in-law had been sloppy with his financial crimes, probably because he assumed I'd never figure out what he was doing. He'd used his legitimate power of attorney to access my accounts, but he'd also been skimming from other sources: his ex-wife's alimony payments, his mother's Medicare reimbursements, even his daughter's trust fund. All of that information went to the FBI, the IRS, and the Colorado Department of Revenue. I also sent copies to his ex-wife's lawyer, his mother's elder care attorney, and his daughter's trust administrator. By noon, Marcus's phone was probably ringing off the hook. Next was Ashley. Real estate agents live and die by their reputations, and Ashley had been using her position to facilitate fraud. I'd documented 6 cases where she'd steered clients into Wade's scheme, earning commissions on both the initial sales and the subsequent flips to Linda Chen's development group. The Colorado Real Estate Commission got a detailed complaint with supporting documentation. The Better Business Bureau got a fraud report, and every real estate review website on the internet got anonymous posts detailing Ashley's involvement in the scheme, complete with public records that backed up every allegation. Linda Chen was trickier. Her development group was technically legitimate, and she'd been careful to stay within the bounds of the law. But her business model depended on acquiring properties from distressed sellers, and I'd found evidence that she'd been deliberately targeting couples going through marital problems. I couldn't prove criminal fraud, but I could make her life very difficult. Environmental impact reports for all her current projects went to the EPA. Zoning compliance issues went to county planning departments. Tax assessment challenges went to local revenue offices. Every piece of paperwork, every permit, every regulatory requirement became a potential roadblock. But Wade was the main target, and I saved the best for last. Wade Foster Construction had been operating for 5 years, and in that time, he'd built a reputation as a quality contractor who delivered premium work on schedule and on budget. What his clients didn't know was that he'd been cutting corners, using substandard materials, and falsifying inspection reports to maximize his profits. I'd spent 3 days going through public records, building permits, and inspection reports for every job Wade had completed. I'd cross-referenced material receipts with project specifications. I'd compared his insurance claims with actual work performed. What I found was a pattern of fraud that went back years. Wade had been billing clients for premium materials while installing cheaper alternatives. He'd been submitting false inspection reports to city building departments, He'd been claiming insurance coverage for weather damage that had never occurred. All of that information went to the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, which oversees contractor licensing. It went to the insurance companies he'd been defrauding. It went to the Better Business Bureau, the local Chamber of Commerce, and every online review platform that mattered. But most importantly, it went to his former clients. I created a simple website, wadefosterexposed.com, and uploaded every document, every photo, every piece of evidence I'd collected. Then I sent the link to everyone who'd ever hired Wade Foster Construction, along with a polite note suggesting they might want to have their work inspected by an independent contractor. By Tuesday afternoon, Wade's phone was ringing constantly. Angry clients, insurance investigators, building inspectors, and reporters from the local newspaper all wanted answers to very uncomfortable questions. But I wasn't done yet. The personal stuff, the affair, the emotional betrayal, that required a different approach. Brooke had built her interior design business on social media, carefully curating an image of domestic perfection and marital bliss. Her Instagram account had 15,000 followers who loved her posts about authentic country living and renovation romance. I'd been taking screenshots of her posts for months, not because I suspected anything, but because I was proud of her success. Now those screenshots became ammunition. I created a timeline showing how her posts about working late at the country house corresponded with Wade's visits. I highlighted the romantic language she used to describe falling in love with the renovation process. I documented how her girls' nights out matched up with the business meetings I'd witnessed. Then I created anonymous accounts on every social media platform and started posting the truth. Not harassment. I was careful about that. Just factual information, supported by documentation, showing the reality behind Brooke's carefully crafted image. Her followers began asking questions. Why were there 2 sets of dinner plates in her solo renovation dinner posts? Who took the photos of her working alone at the country house? Why did her renovation timeline match up so perfectly with Wade Foster Construction's project schedule? By Wednesday, Brooke's comment sections were full of speculation and gossip. By Thursday, she'd turned off comments entirely. By Friday, she'd made her account private. But the damage was done. In the interior design world, reputation is everything, and Brooke's reputation was now tied to a contractor who was facing multiple fraud investigations. The final piece of my revenge was the most personal. I printed out every photo, every document, every piece of evidence I'd collected. I put it all in a manila envelope and drove to Ashley's office on Friday afternoon. She was showing a property to potential buyers when I walked in, all smiles and professional charm. The smile disappeared when she saw me. "Daniel," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "this isn't a good time." "I think it's a perfect time," I said, loud enough for her clients to hear. "I wanted to thank you for all your help with our country house purchase. We can discuss this later." "No need to discuss anything. I just wanted to make sure you got a copy of my letter to the real estate commission." I handed her the envelope. "You know, the one about how you've been facilitating fraud for the past 2 years." Her clients looked confused. Ashley looked like she wanted to disappear. "I also wanted to let you know that the FBI will probably want to interview you next week. Something about conspiracy and wire fraud. But I'm sure you already knew that." I turned to her clients, a nice-looking couple in their 30s. "You folks might want to get a second opinion before you make any major real estate decisions. Just a suggestion." I left Ashley standing in her office, holding the envelope like it was radioactive, while her clients peppered her with questions she couldn't answer. That evening, I sat in my empty house and opened a beer. My phone had been buzzing all day. Calls from Brooke, from Marcus, from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. I wasn't interested in explanations or apologies or attempts at reconciliation. I'd spent a week methodically destroying the lives of everyone who'd tried to destroy mine, and I felt absolutely no guilt about it. They'd gambled that I was too weak, too trusting, or too stupid to fight back. They'd lost. The weekend brought a parade of consequences that were even more satisfying than I'd hoped. Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when someone started pounding on my front door. I looked through the peephole and saw Wade Foster, looking like he hadn't slept in days. I opened the door but left the security chain attached. "What do you want, Wade?" "You son of a bitch," he snarled. "You've destroyed everything I've worked for." "Have I? That's terrible." "The state suspended my contractor's license. My insurance company dropped me. I've got clients threatening to sue me for fraud." "Sounds like you've got some problems to work out. You planted evidence. You made up those inspection reports." "I didn't plant anything, Wade. I just compiled information that was already in public records. If that information makes you look bad, maybe you should have thought about that before you started cutting corners." He pressed his face against the gap in the door. "This isn't over, Parker. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you're messing with." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." I smiled at him through the chain. "You know what's funny, Wade? You keep making promises you can't keep. You promised my wife you'd take care of her. You promised your clients quality work. You promised your investors profitable returns. How's that working out for you?" He rattled the door handle, but the chain held. "I'm calling the police," I said calmly. "You're trespassing, and you're making threats. That's probably not going to help with your legal problems." Wade stepped back from the door, his face red with rage. "You think you've won? Your wife still loves me. Your marriage is still over. Your family is still destroyed." "Maybe. But at least I'm not facing federal fraud charges." He stood there for another moment, breathing hard, then turned and walked away. I watched through the window as he got into his truck and drove off, probably to deal with the next crisis in what had become a very complicated week for Wade Foster Construction. Sunday brought a different kind of visitor. I was working in my basement, upgrading my home security system, when Mia came home. She'd been staying with friends since the confrontation, avoiding both me and her mother, trying to pretend that her family wasn't imploding around her. "Dad?" she called down the stairs. "Down here, kiddo." She came down slowly, looking around at the organized chaos of my workshop. "What are you doing?" "Installing some new equipment, motion sensors, cameras, that sort of thing." "Because of what happened with Wade?" "Because I've learned that it's important to know what's happening in your own house." She sat down in my old desk chair, spinning it slowly. "Mom says you're trying to destroy her life. What do you think?" "I think everyone in this family has lost their minds." I stopped working and looked at my daughter. She was 17, old enough to understand that the world was complicated, but still young enough to believe that parents were supposed to have their shit together. "Mia, I want you to understand something. I didn't start this fight, but I'm going to finish it." "By ruining everyone's life?" "By protecting what's mine. This house, our family's money, my reputation. Your mother and her friends tried to steal all of it. They thought I was too weak or too stupid to stop them. So you decided to prove them wrong by becoming some kind of revenge monster." I sat down across from her. "Your mother had an affair. Your uncle stole money from your college fund. Your mother's best friend helped them forge my signature on legal documents. They were planning to sell this house and split the profits while leaving us with nothing." Mia was quiet for a long moment. "Is that really what happened?" "That's really what happened." "And now?" "Now they're dealing with the consequences of their choices." "What about Mom? What's going to happen to her?" "I don't know, kiddo. That depends on a lot of things that are out of my control." She spun the chair again. "This is all so messed up." "Yeah, it is. But it's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to fix it." "Then whose responsibility is it?" "The people who broke it in the first place." Monday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. My lawyer called to tell me that Marcus had been arrested on fraud charges, that Ashley's real estate license had been suspended pending investigation, and that Wade was facing a grand jury inquiry into his business practices. Linda Chen's development group had withdrawn their offer on the country house and were trying to distance themselves from the entire situation. Brooke had filed for divorce. "How do you want to handle the settlement negotiations?" my lawyer asked. "Aggressively," I said. "She forged my signature, participated in a scheme to defraud me, and had an affair with her co-conspirator. I want everything: the house, the country property, full custody of Mia, and compensation for the money they stole." "That's a pretty aggressive position. She might fight it." "Let her fight. I've got documentation of everything they did, and I'm not interested in being reasonable with people who tried to steal my life." "What if she offers a compromise? Split assets, shared custody, that sort of thing?" "Then she should have thought about that before she decided to screw me over." That afternoon, I drove out to the country house one last time. I wanted to see it without the weight of betrayal and deception, to remember why Brooke and I had bought it in the first place. It really was beautiful. The renovation work was high quality, despite Wade's other problems, and the setting was perfect: woods, lake, mountains in the distance. It could have been a great retreat for our family, a place to build new memories and strengthen our marriage. Instead, it had become the headquarters for a conspiracy to destroy everything I'd worked for. I walked through the rooms, remembering the plans Brooke and I had made, the dreams we'd shared about weekend getaways and family gatherings. All of that was gone now, poisoned by lies and betrayal. But the house itself was still beautiful, and it was still mine. I locked up and drove back to town, where I had work to do. Because while Wade, Marcus, and Ashley were dealing with the legal consequences of their actions, and while Brooke was trying to salvage her reputation and her business, I was planning the next phase of my life. A life without people who thought they could use me, steal from me, or lie to me without consequences. A life where I controlled the narrative, protected my interests, and never again made the mistake of trusting the wrong people. It was going to be a good life. 3 months later, the legal machinery had ground through most of the mess my former family and friends had created. Marcus pled guilty to wire fraud and embezzlement, earning himself 18 months in federal prison and a restitution order that would keep him broke for the next decade. His BMW got repossessed, his condo got foreclosed, and his daughter stopped speaking to him entirely. Ashley lost her real estate license permanently and was facing a civil lawsuit from 6 different clients who'd been steered into Wade's scheme. She'd moved to Phoenix, where she was working as a receptionist at a car dealership and living in a studio apartment. Wade's contractor license was permanently revoked, his business was bankrupt, and he was facing multiple felony charges for fraud and filing false inspection reports. His truck got repossessed, his tools got seized by creditors, and his reputation in the construction industry was completely destroyed. Linda Chen's development group was under investigation by 3 different federal agencies and had suspended all new acquisitions while their lawyers tried to sort out the mess. And Brooke was learning what life looked like when your carefully constructed image collapsed and took your business with it. Her Instagram account was gone, her client list had evaporated, and she was working part-time at a furniture store while living in Ashley's old apartment. The divorce had been finalized with terms that heavily favored me. I kept both houses, most of the assets, and primary custody of Mia. Brooke got weekend visitation and the privilege of starting over from scratch at 38 years old. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like justice had been served. Instead, I felt empty. The revenge had been complete and devastating, but it hadn't filled the hole that 23 years of marriage had left behind. It hadn't restored my trust in people, hadn't made me feel less alone, hadn't answered the fundamental question of what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. I was thinking about all of this on a Friday evening in March, sitting in my basement workshop and pretending to organize tools I'd already organized 3 times, when Mia came downstairs. "Dad, there's someone here to see you." "Who?" "Mom." I hadn't seen Brooke since the divorce hearing 6 weeks earlier. She'd looked hollow then, worn down by months of legal battles and public humiliation. I wondered what she looked like now. "Tell her I'm busy." "Dad, just talk to her, please." "Why?" "Because she's my mom, and you're my dad, and I'm tired of being the only person in this family who acts like an adult." I looked at my daughter, who was almost 18 now, and had somehow managed to navigate the wreckage of our family with more grace than any of the actual adults involved. "Fine. 5 minutes." I found Brooke in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch like she was ready to run. She looked older, thinner, with lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. Her hair was shorter, her clothes were cheaper, and she had the beaten-down look of someone who'd learned that actions have consequences. "Hello, Daniel." "Brooke." We stared at each other across the room that had once been the center of our shared life. "I wanted to apologize," she said finally. "Okay." "And I wanted to ask you to stop." "Stop what?" "You know what. The reviews, the social media posts, the phone calls to potential employers. I can't get work anywhere because your campaign against me follows me everywhere I go." I sat down across from her. "I haven't posted anything about you in months. But the damage is permanent. Every time someone Googles my name, they find stories about the affair, the fraud, all of it. I can't escape what I did. That's not my problem. It's Mia's problem. She needs her mother to be able to support herself, to have some kind of life. Right now, I'm barely surviving. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy our marriage." Tears started flowing down her cheeks. I know I screwed up everything. I know I hurt you and Mia and threw away 23 years for something stupid and selfish. I know I don't deserve forgiveness." "You're right. You don't. But I'm asking anyway. Not for me. For Mia. She needs to see that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define the rest of your life." I looked at this woman I'd once loved, who'd once been my partner and my best friend, who'd become a stranger willing to betray everything we'd built together. "What exactly are you asking for, Brooke? Help me disappear from the internet. Use your computer skills to bury the search results. Clean up my online reputation enough that I can get a decent job. I'll pay you back over time." "With what money?" "I'll figure it out. I'll work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever it takes." I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about what she was asking. It would be easy enough to do. Search engine optimization, reputation management, a few strategic website modifications. I could probably clean up her digital footprint in a couple of weeks. The question was whether I wanted to. "Why should I help you?" "Because you won. You destroyed everyone who betrayed you, and you did it so thoroughly that we'll never recover. You proved your point. Now maybe it's time to show some mercy." "Mercy?" "Yes, the kind of mercy I should have shown our marriage before I threw it away." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the suburban street where we'd raised our daughter, where we'd pretended to be happy even when we weren't, where I'd built a life that turned out to be built on quicksand. "You know what the worst part was?" I said without turning around. "Tell me." "It wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the money. It was the fact that you all thought I was too stupid to figure out what was happening. You treated me like I was some kind of fool who deserved to be lied to." "You're not a fool, Daniel. You're one of the smartest people I've ever known. That's why your revenge was so effective." I turned back to face her. "Smart enough to know that helping you now doesn't benefit me in any way. It benefits Mia. Mia's going to college in the fall. She'll be fine. It benefits you too, even if you don't see it now." "How?" "Because holding on to this anger is eating you alive. I can see it in your face, in the way you move, in the way you talk to our daughter. You've won the war, Daniel, but you're still fighting battles that are already over. She stood up and walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm just asking you to let me try to rebuild some kind of life so that our daughter doesn't have to be ashamed of both her parents. After she left, I sat in the empty living room for a long time, thinking about revenge and justice and the difference between winning and healing. I thought about Wade Foster, whose life I'd systematically destroyed, who was now facing years in prison for crimes that went far beyond sleeping with my wife. I thought about Marcus, who'd stolen money from his own family and was now paying the price in ways that would follow him for the rest of his life. I thought about Ashley, who'd built her career on betraying her client's trust and was now starting over in a different state with a different name. And I thought about Brooke, who'd traded 23 years of marriage for a few months of excitement and was now learning what it cost to rebuild a life from nothing. I'd won. Completely, devastatingly, permanently. But sitting in my empty house, surrounded by the wreckage of relationships I'd systematically destroyed, I wasn't sure what victory was supposed to feel like. I opened my laptop and started working on Brooke's digital rehabilitation. Not because I forgave her, and not because I wanted to help her, but because Mia was right about one thing. Someone in this family needed to act like an adult. And maybe, after months of being the villain in everyone else's story, it was time to try being the hero in my own. 2 weeks later, Brooke called to tell me she'd gotten a job at an interior design firm in Denver. It wasn't much. Assistant to an assistant, basically. But it was a start. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, thank Mia. I did it for her, not for you. I know, but thank you anyway. I hung up and went back to my basement workshop where I was building something new, not a security system or a surveillance setup, but a workbench for the country house. Because I'd decided to keep it, to finish the renovation myself, to turn it into something that belonged entirely to me. A place where I could build new memories that weren't poisoned by betrayal, where I could start the next chapter of my life on my own terms. It was going to be a good life. Different from what I'd planned, smaller in some ways, but entirely mine. And after everything that had happened, that felt like enough.